Lights under the door. It was the kind of door you don't think about during the day. Plain, painted white once but yellowed with age, its edges chipped where the frame had swollen over the years. It belonged to the spare room in my apartment, a place I almost never entered, not because I was afraid of it, but because there was no reason to. The room was empty, bare walls, a wooden floor, a single small window facing the alley. Dust clung to the corners, and the air always smelled faintly stale, like the dry breath of paper forgotten in boxes. During the day it was harmless, just another part of the apartment. But at night, that door became something else. At night, it began to breathe with a light of its own. The first time I noticed it was by accident. I had woken thirsty, padding barefoot down the hallway toward the kitchen. The apartment was dark, the kind of heavy dark where the air feels thicker, where the hum of the refrigerator fills every corner. That was when I saw it, a thin line of brightness spilling from beneath the spare room door. Not the soft gold of a lamp or the blue-white glow of electronics. This light was different. Pale, cold, almost silvery, like moonlight forced into a shape it didn't belong to. I froze. My hand hung suspended above the light switch, but I didn't flick it on. I only stood there, watching the thin line stretch along the floorboards. The room had no lamp, no plugged-in cords, nothing that could explain illumination. The air smelled faintly different, too. Not the dry mustiness of dust, but something sharper, metallic, almost like the tang of ozone that follows a lightning strike. It clung to the back of my throat until I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. I remember stepping closer, bare soles meeting the cool floor. The line of light didn't flicker as it would have if something had been moving inside. It stayed steady, humming against the wood, so unnatural it made my skin crawl. My first instinct was to touch the knob, to open the door and see. But I didn't. Something deep inside told me not to, some small animal voice in the back of my mind that hissed at me to leave it shut. So I did. I turned away, filled my glass in the kitchen, and went back to bed. But I couldn't sleep. The glow burned into my thoughts, replaying each time I closed my eyes. It felt wrong, too deliberate, as if it wanted to be seen, as if it wanted me curious. The next night it returned. Same time, same pale line beneath the door. I stood at the end of the hall longer this time, listening. That was when I realized the silence was too perfect. The building was never this still. Old pipes always groaned, floorboards creaked, neighbors coughed through the thin walls. But standing in that hallway, staring at that light, all I heard was the faint hum of electricity, steady and low, seeping from the crack. It didn't feel like silence. It felt like listening to something hold its breath on the other side. Nights became a ritual. I would wake without reason, the clock always hovering around 3 in the morning. I'd step into the hallway, heart already beating faster, and see the glow waiting for me. The air was always colder there, the draft sliding out beneath the door carrying that metallic tang. Some nights it stung my nose like burnt wiring, other nights it was wet and earthy like rain on stone. The strangest part was the way the light seemed to bend. Not flicker, not fade, but bend, like it was pressing against the crack in the floor, pushing itself into my space, as though it wanted to spill further but couldn't. I never opened the door. I told myself I was being cautious, but deep down, I knew it wasn't caution. It was fear, the kind of fear that roots itself in the body, ancient and instinctive. The fear of seeing something that cannot be unseen. It didn't stop. Some nights, the light shifted in color. What was once pale silver turned faintly green, then red, then white again, always pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. I'd find myself standing closer, one step at a time, until I could almost feel the heat radiating from the crack. But when I lifted my hand toward the knob, my skin tingled, as though the air itself warned me away. Once, I knelt to look at it directly. The glow stung my eyes, sharp and piercing, and for a second I thought I saw movement. A shadow cutting across it, fast but undeniable. Not shaped like a person, not shaped like anything I could name. Just movement, as if something inside had passed between the light and the door. I stumbled back so quickly I hit the opposite wall, chest tight, lungs dragging in air that didn't feel clean anymore. After that, I never got that close again. But the light grew bolder. There were nights when it didn't wait for me. Nights when I woke to find the glow already spilling further, reaching past the threshold, crawling along the hallway carpet. It didn't illuminate the way normal light did. It didn't brighten objects around it. Instead, it seemed to swallow them, turning the edges of everything it touched hazy and unreal. The smell worsened too. What began as faint ozone shifted into dampness, mold, rot. Sometimes sweet, like spoiled fruit. Sometimes sour, like rust. Always strong enough to curl in my stomach. I tried sealing the crack, stuffing a towel along the base of the door. It didn't matter. The glow still bled through, threading between fibers, staining the fabric with faint pale streaks. I threw the towel away the next morning, but the smell clung to my hands for hours. The dreams came next. In them, I stood inside the room, though I never remembered opening the door. The light wasn't a line anymore, but a flood, cascading from the ceiling, pooling along the walls. Shadows swirled within it, twisting in shapes I couldn't follow, moving with purpose but never slowing enough for me to name. I'd wake drenched in sweat, my skin still tingling as though the glow had touched me. Every morning after, the spare room door looked the same. Closed, silent, harmless in daylight. But each night it waited. Now, I dread the hour before it comes. The silence beforehand is unbearable, heavy and watchful, as though the apartment itself knows what is about to happen. My body wakes before my mind does, dragging me into the hallway, into that cold draft, into the sight of that impossible glow. And each night it feels closer, more insistent. Last night, I swear I saw fingers. Not shadows, not tricks of the light, but fingers pressing against the crack beneath the door. Long, pale, jointed wrong, curling into the carpet before vanishing as the glow pulsed brighter. The smell filled my lungs so violently I gagged, stumbling backward, but the light followed me. It stretched further this time, reaching toward my feet, staining the hallway until I collapsed against my bedroom door. I don't know how much longer I can pretend I won't open it. I know it's waiting for me to. And tonight, as I write this, the apartment is already too quiet. The clock reads 2:57. The hallway is dark for now, but I feel the air shifting, the metallic tang seeping through, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. Soon the glow will return, crawling across the floor. And I know one night it will not stop at the crack. It will flood the hallway. It will pour through. And I don't know if I'll have the strength to look away. "13th step down. There is a staircase in the old house I live in, narrow and wooden, sagging slightly in the center as if years of weight have pressed it into a weary bow. The steps creak with the memory of everyone who has ever climbed them, each one producing its own tone, its own voice in the dark. I used to think the sound was just age, timber flexing underfoot. But the longer I've lived here, the more I've come to believe the stairs are not simply wood and nails. They are a presence. They remember, and the memory lingers most of all on the 13th step. The staircase leads down to the basement, a place I seldom go. The basement isn't welcoming. Its air is thick with damp earth, and it carries the smell of stone that has sweated in the dark for too long. The walls are rough, marked with mineral stains that glisten faintly in the light of a single dangling bulb. Down there the air is always cooler, sharp against my skin, and filled with a stillness that feels unnatural, like the silence that follows when something has just stopped moving. To reach it, though, you have to pass over the 13th step. The first 12 are ordinary enough. They groan, they shift, they mutter beneath your weight. But the 13th, there is something wrong about the way it reacts. It doesn't just creak, it sinks. It seems to give more than it should, sagging as if it remembers the shape of your foot, as if it molds itself around you. The first time I noticed was late at night, when I went down searching for an old box of winter clothes. My hand rested against the wall as I descended, feeling the cold stone brush against my knuckles, when suddenly, on the 13th step, the wood seemed to dip more sharply. My foot pressed down, and for a brief second, I felt as though I had stepped not onto wood, but into something softer, something that seemed to resist and then accept me. A sensation shot up through my leg, cold, clinging, almost liquid. My stomach lurched, and I instinctively pulled back. The step creaked loudly, as though complaining about my hesitation, and I nearly lost my balance. I laughed it off at the time. Old houses are full of strange sensations. Warped wood, uneven nails. But that night I couldn't shake the memory of how it had felt, that impression of something alive beneath the sole of my foot. I tried to ignore it, but the 13th step didn't ignore me. Every time I descended, it seemed to anticipate me, sagging lower, groaning longer. The creak of that step was different, hollow, drawn out, as if the wood stretched beyond what should be possible. I began to dread it. The first 12 steps I could manage, though each one echoed through the narrow stairwell, bouncing off the walls like whispers. But when I reached the 13th, my chest would tighten, my palms would sweat against the wooden railing. There was one night I lingered there too long. I had gone down to check the circuit breaker after a sudden outage. The air was damp, filled with the scent of mildew, and my flashlight beam danced nervously across the stone. As I descended, step after step groaning beneath me, I found myself pausing above the 13th, unwilling to put my weight on it. I hovered there, the flashlight beam shivering across the floor below, and I realized something terrifying. The air seeping up from the basement was not still. It moved faintly like a breath. Each exhale carried with it the smell of earth, of rot, of something deeper than stone. And when I finally forced my foot onto the 13th step, it was as though I had completed a circuit. The wood sank violently, my heel slipping as though into mud, and I heard it. Not a creak, not the groan of timber, but a sound that lived in the hollowness beneath the stairs. A sigh, long, rattling, and human. I yanked my foot back and scrambled down the rest as quickly as I could, heart hammering. I remember standing in the cold basement, the dangling bulb swinging slightly though I had not touched it, the shadows stretching in strange directions. My skin prickled as though unseen eyes watched me through cracks in the stone. When I finally forced myself back up, I skipped the 13th step entirely, leaping over it, gripping the railing until my fingers ached. Since then, I have avoided the basement whenever possible. But there are nights when the house itself seems to draw me there. Nights when the air upstairs feels heavy, pressing against my chest, guiding me toward the stairwell. Nights when I wake to the faintest sound of creaking wood, though I know I am the only one awake. Each time, the sound halts at the 13th step. I have stood at the top of the stairs, shrouded in darkness, listening to that solitary groan, that single note drawn from the house like a string being plucked. I imagine something standing there, weightless but heavy enough to make the woods sing. Something waiting. Once, I made the mistake of kneeling beside it in the daylight. I pressed my hand against the 13th step, running my fingers along its worn surface. The wood was colder than the others, smoother too, as if it had been polished by countless feet. My nails scraped along the edge, and for a moment I swore I felt it pulse, just once, faintly, as though something beneath had shifted in response to my touch. I jerked my hand away, and for hours afterward, my fingertips tingled as though coated in frost. Now I cannot stop thinking about what lies beneath. The space under the stairs is walled off, boarded shut long before I ever moved in. I've wondered what I would find if I pried those planks away, rotting timber, perhaps, or the skeleton of a dead animal. But deep inside, I know that whatever waits beneath the 13th step is not lifeless. The boards are not keeping something out. They are keeping something in. I've begun to hear it more often. At night, when the wind rattles the windows, when the refrigerator hums its endless drone, I hear the faint groan of that single step. Not from my weight, not from footsteps, but from pressure inside the wood itself, as though it strains against what holds it shut. And sometimes, when I pass the stairwell in the dark, I see the faint outline of something beneath it, a shadow stretching where no shadow should reach, pressed thin against the cracks, waiting. I know one day it will not wait anymore. One day the 13th step will give completely, splintering beneath me, dragging me down into that hollow. And whatever breathes there in the dark, whatever sighs through the wood each night, will finally have me. Until then, I count the steps each time I descend, whispering the numbers in my head like a prayer. 1, 2, 3. My pulse quickens as the numbers rise. 11, 12. My chest locks tight as I hover over the next. 13. Always 13. And each time, the house remembers me a little more. Cold shift. The hospital at night feels like a different building altogether. During the day, it buzzes with fluorescent light and the dull roar of movement. Nurses shuffling charts, patients dragging 4 poles, the mechanical beeping of monitors filling every gap of silence. But when night falls, when most of the world outside curls itself into sleep, the hospital seems to hollow out, leaving behind a skeletal version of itself. It was on one of those nights, my shift beginning at 11, stretching toward dawn, that I began to notice the cold. Not the ordinary chill of air conditioning, not the draft from an open door, but something deeper. A cold that seeped into my bones no matter how many layers I wore. A cold that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The corridors were lit in their endless, buzzing hum, but the glow of the fluorescent lights never felt warm. They painted the tiled floors a sickly shade of white, reflecting back too brightly, forcing every speck of dirt into clarity. The smell of antiseptic clung heavy in the air, sharp and sour at the back of my throat, a smell that had long since become inseparable from the idea of the hospital itself. I told myself it was just exhaustion. Long shifts blur the hours, stretch the walls, make the air feel thicker than it really is. But I knew this was something else. It began in the East Wing, the one with older patient rooms that weren't used much anymore. The overhead lights there flickered more often, buzzing in staccato bursts that made shadows twitch against the walls. The tiles were cracked in places, the paint peeling along the baseboards. The scent was different too, Not just antiseptic, but underneath it, the musk of mildew, the faint bite of mold creeping in unseen corners. I walked that wing often on rounds, making sure the empty rooms remained locked, checking that the silence was intact. It was there, passing the third room on the left, that the cold first struck me. It hit like stepping into a freezer. My breath misted instantly, hanging before my face in a pale cloud that shimmered in the artificial light. My hands stiffened around the clipboard I carried, and for a moment, I thought perhaps the ventilation system had failed, blasting winter air through the vents. But when I looked up, the vents above were still motionless. The cold wasn't blowing from anywhere. It was simply there, surrounding me, sinking its claws into my skin. I forced myself forward, shoes squeaking faintly on the polished tile, every step echoing too loudly against the empty hall. My pulse hammered in my ears, and I told myself to keep walking, to shake it off. Hospitals are strange places. They hold memories as much as they hold people. But as I passed that room, the third on the left, I couldn't help but glance at the small square window set into its door. The glass was frosted with grime, but behind it, for just a second, I thought I saw something. A faint glow, pale and wrong, moving in slow waves like light through water. When I blinked, it was gone. I moved on quickly, refusing to look back, though every step I took carried the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my back. The cold followed me. Night after night, I found myself returning to that hallway, unwilling but drawn. Each time, the cold was worse, gnawing deeper, my skin prickling with goose flesh the moment I entered. And each time, as I passed the third room, I felt something just beyond the glass. Something waiting. I stopped sleeping properly. Even when my shift ended, I would lie awake in my apartment, the taste of antiseptic still sharp in my mouth, the echo of that cold clinging to me like frost. My dreams grew heavy, twisted by images I didn't want to claim as my own. Long corridors stretched endlessly ahead of me, their lights flickering out one by one until only darkness remained. From that darkness, I could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, measured, always descending behind me, always growing closer, though when I turned, there was nothing but silence. Back at the hospital, things began to slip. The first time it happened, I thought it was fatigue. I had been filling out charts at the desk, my pen scratching against paper, when I glanced up and realized the clock above me had stopped. Its hands were frozen at 3:12. I checked my watch, 3:12 exactly. But when I blinked, when I looked again, the second hand was moving as if it had never stalled. The next time, it wasn't the clock. It was the lights. I had been walking the corridor toward the east wing when the fluorescent tubes overhead blinked out, plunging me into a sudden, suffocating darkness. My body froze, every muscle locked, as if the black pressed against me physically. In the silence, I heard it, the faintest sound of breathing, not my own, heavy and damp, close enough that I could feel the condensation on my cheek. The lights buzzed back to life in an instant, their sterile glow flooding the hall again, and the air was empty. But the cold clung harder than ever. I tried to speak of it once to another nurse, hinting at the strange drafts, the way the east wing seemed wrong. She only shook her head, muttering that nobody liked being there at night. That was all. No further explanation, as if whatever lived there was simply accepted, part of the hospital's bones. The worst came last week. I was sent to deliver supplies to a storage closet at the far end of the east wing. The hall stretched long and quiet, each step echoing, each flickering bulb buzzing like an insect. When I passed the third room on the left, I made the mistake of slowing down. My eyes caught the window in the door, and this time the glow behind it wasn't faint. It pulsed, a pale, icy light, shifting like frozen breath. I could see the outlines of the room more clearly than I should have, the metal bed frame, the empty chair beside it. But they were wrong, distorted, bending at angles that made no sense. And then something moved. It wasn't a shadow, not exactly. It was the absence of light within the glow, tall and narrow, with edges that blurred as if it couldn't hold its shape. It slid closer to the window, stretching toward me. My entire body went rigid. The clipboard slipped from my hands and clattered against the tiles. The sound was deafening, shattering the silence. The shape froze, its edges trembling as though it had been startled. Then, without warning, the glow extinguished, leaving only the darkened room. The cold spread instantly, rushing beneath the door, flooding the hall. My breath burst white before me, every inhale stinging like needles. I ran then, my shoes slamming against the floor, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead as if they struggled to keep up. Even now, I cannot forget the feeling that followed me all the way back to the nurse's station. Not footsteps, not breathing, but the unmistakable sense of something moving just beyond my vision. Something that belonged to the cold, that had waited in the third room for far too long, and had finally noticed me. Since that night, the East Wing hasn't been the same. The cold doesn't wait for me there anymore. It follows me across the hospital, seeping beneath door frames, curling under the wheels of gurneys, whispering in vents. I feel it in the break room, in the elevators, even in the bright chaos of the ER. Always present, always just enough to make me shiver when no one else does. I know it's only a matter of time before it steps fully into the halls, before it no longer hides behind frosted glass or flickering lights. I know it will find me, because it has already chosen me. And when it does, it will not be warmth I remember. Only the cold,